Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to January, welcome to 2017 and welcome to my NAMM Show special edition of Molten Music Monthly. It's flipping freezing out here. Last couple of years at NAMM have been kind of slightly underwhelming. It's been a little bit tricky trying to pull out interesting things to talk about. There's always interesting things and good stuff, but it tends to sort of finish with a bit of a This year, it seems to have gone off in completely different directions. The computer music side is kind of even more nerd than usual, whereas on the hardware side, the synthesis side and the modular side, it's turned into some kind of patch crazy. I mean, both Roland and PreSonus released audio interfaces that look like everybody else's, and the lovely Stephen Slate thinks he's invented the virtual studio.
I would dream that one day I would have a studio with all those amazing, cool studio toys.
But then what? Well, there are a couple of things. I have dragged out a few things to talk about, which I'll get to in just a minute. But on the other hand, we have all this hardware synthesis, all this modular synthesis. There was tons of it. It was patched into chaos over here and muddled through here and strapping over there and sounds going here and beeps going there and noises and whoop and whoop and bloop, 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 bloop. It was just kind of madness, really. Where did it all come from? I mean, last year you had kind of big synth releases from the old school people, from Korg, from Roland, from Moog. But this year, they were all pretty quiet, really. Instead, you have all these independent manufacturers putting together their little modules, releasing a whole stack of stuff, little things that do little things. And it was like all of them were sharing the one booth, which kind of makes NAMM affordable, I suppose. And so with my new Molten Modular project, I kind of have a renewed interest in hardware synthesis and the like, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end. So first of all, I'm going to cover computer music like I always do, and then I'm going to stick a bit on the end about modular because I find it interesting and you might find it interesting. Who knows? If not, you can always skip that bit, or if you're just into that, skip straight to it. I really don't mind. So let's get on with it before I freeze to death. Traction Corporation then, they seem to be evolving again, changing their name again. I think they're keeping Traction as kind of their corporate identity. And as we know, their software, Traction, then sort of evolved into T, as in T5, T6, the current version T7. And now they're on the move again. They're changing the name to Waveform. Yeah, it's kind of a little bit generic. I mean, how are they ever going to be found on Google? Still, I mean, it also kind of indicates that it's all about audio, which I don't think it is that either. But anyway, I'm sure they had masses of committee meetings in order to come up with their new name for their DAW. So it will be called Waveform from now on. And it looks great. It looks really interesting. They've finally put in the mixer console. You can finally mix on a proper console in Waveform, which is awesome. I mean, it looks like they've sort of really gone to town on it. There's all sorts of different views, lots of lovely vectors sort of zooming in and out. It's an enormously creative DAW, I find. I love all the modulation sections. And actually the way that they build the mixer on the right, even though it's not a mixer, gives you a lot of sort of powerful routing and effects processing and modulation possibilities. There's a lot of stuff in there. I did a review of T7 not that long ago, so check that out on the YouTube channel. But one of the big things that they're talking about with this new Waveform software is that it can run on a Raspberry Pi 3. Do we want that? I don't know. I guess you can take this kind of palm-sized computer with you and a screen and then set up a mobile recording rig. I mean, that's quite interesting. Are there any audio interfaces for Linux? Possibly, there are some out there. Anyway, I mean, it just goes to show about how efficient their coding is, the fact that it can run off an SD card on a tiny little computer. That's pretty cool, I think. I'm just not quite sure what I would do with it myself. But for other people out there, that must be awesome. But it also runs on Windows, it also runs on Mac, and it looks pretty nice. I'm looking forward to reviewing it when it's released. Media Overkill was formed by a bunch of people who worked on synths like the Alesis Andromeda, which is this enormous synthesizer. And their first product is called Wave Razor. Now it looks flipping amazing, all very sort of Tron and liney and coloured and blue and red and all sorts of weirdness going on. And the sound is some kind of aggressive beastie. It's like splits up waveforms and spits them back out at you. It's brutal and awesome. I like it a lot. I also like the fact that the language option for the interface is also available in Klingon. Yes, that's exactly how nerdy they are. Anyway, it looks like an awesome virtual synth, and I'm looking forward to getting my teeth into that one. UAD are forever trying to look clever, and this year they slightly altered the colour of their Apollo twin Thunderbolt interface, and they've upgraded it to call it a Mark II. I'm still struggling to find out exactly what the differences are, but as I understand it, you can now use certain preamp emulations on inputs. I didn't realise you couldn't do that before, but anyway, so this is a big thing apparently. They call it Unison, and it means you've got access to things like Neve and Manley and other famous vintage and classic preamplifiers that can now be emulated through the inputs. That's exciting. There's also a version 2 of the console software that comes with it, which apparently is very, very good. I've not used it. See, I told you I was struggling to find things to talk about. But UAD have also farmed themselves out a little bit. Softube's Console 1 is this sort of lovely little desktop box with a bunch of knobs on that lets you control an entire channel strip in your DAW. So, you know, EQ and plugins and that kind of thing. It's a really useful thing, but it's always been a bit pricey, so they've just slashed the price to under $500, which is excellent. And they've just built in some UAD plugins. I'm not sure how. They must be using similar DSP architecture. Who knows? But now it comes with a bunch of UAD plugins, and you can stick more in it and stuff like that. So it's more stuff for less money. The Console 1 Mark II. What's not to like about that? Probably the biggest update generally of the show was Halion 6. Now Halion is Steinberg's kind of enormous sampler workstation instrument thing. He comes with gigabytes of library, plays loads of cool sounds, that kind of thing. But with version 6, they've now actually turned it into a sampler. At last, you can sample with it, you can record directly into it, you can drag and drop samples, you can record directly from Cubase or any other DAW, you can drop audio into it and actually build instruments. They've put in a scripting thing to let you write all the articulations and the way that the instrument works. You can layer and build up the most enormous instruments that you could possibly dream of. They've also stuck in some kind of wavetable synthesis engine in there as well for further sort of noodling and messing around with synthesis and sampling all sort of together in strange ways. The interface looks amazing. All this sort of 3D, lovely zoomy stuff that you perhaps used to see on the Fairlight 100,000 years ago. So that's looking really flipping cool. I mean, I've never had a lot of love for Halion particularly because it has, to me, always seemed a bit just like a Rompler, a sample playback system, unlike something like Contact or Gigastudio that I used to be really into when Halion first came out. But with this update, it really does look like it could become a creative instrument building thing. And that's brilliant. I like that. Thank you, Steinberg, for catching up with yourself and actually making Halion the software that perhaps it should have always been. This didn't make a whole lot of sense. Initially, I wasn't quite really sure what they were talking about, but Roland Cloud, the basic idea is that it's a subscription service from Roland to give you access to extraordinary sounds. Now, one of the ways of doing this is with something called the Terra Piano, or there's going to be other instruments as well, but at the moment they have this Terra Piano, and the idea is that it's the most enormous multi-sampled piano you could possibly imagine. It is 8 terabytes in size, which is large. Now, how could you possibly access that in your DAW over the internet? Well, you can't. So what they do is you download about a gig's worth of local content, you play that, and it sounds fantastic. And then when you go to render the track, it renders it in the cloud on the 8 terabyte piano and sends it back to you as this amazingly articulate and expressive performance sampled on this enormous piano. It's an interesting idea. I mean, personally, I think pianos kind of sound all right already, virtual ones, so I'm not entirely sure what that's giving me. However, they are going to be more instruments. There's a Terra drums on the way, so you'll be getting this extraordinary drum kit. So you do your drums locally and then render it in the cloud, and you get delivered this extraordinary performance. It's very interesting. However, that's not what interested me about this, because hidden away within the Roland Cloud subscription are also all the ACB synths. What are the ACB synths? Well, these are Roland's new sort of virtual analog modeled synthesizers that are currently only available in hardware. So their new IRA System 1 and System 8 keyboards, they can handle, well, first of all, they have their own sounds, but then you can put in extra emulated sounds. So currently there's an SH-101, an SH-2, a ProMars, a System 100, and these are being used as what they call plug-out synths because they plug into hardware. So you can essentially exchange the internal software of your System 1 synthesizer and put in an SH-101 instead, and all the knobs and bits and pieces work as they should do on the SH-101. It's cool. It's an excellent thing to have as part of your hardware. However, now Roland have released them all as software plugins, but only on the Roland Cloud. So as part of the package, you can download an SH-101, an SH-2, a ProMars, a System 100, and also a software version of the System 1 itself. I mean, they're phenomenal. They work exactly what they're supposed to do. They sound exactly right. They work in the right way. All the knobs and bits and pieces are all there. They are flipping phenomenal. Now, I somehow managed to get myself in there on some kind of free NAMM deal, and so I have them on trial for a month because it's a subscription service, as I said, and the damage is $30 a month. Whew. Now that's quite a lot. I mean, that's $360 a year. I mean, I would be at a push prepared to pay $360 for these synths, but then I'd want them forever, not to have to keep on paying that, because I don't tend to use software synths all the time. I use them in different projects at different times. And to be subscribing to something just to allow me to use something occasionally seems, I don't know, it seems a bit much for me. But that's not all. There was also another sampled synth called Anthology 1987. Now this, to my ears, is basically a Roland D50. I mean, when I was a kid, my dad had a Roland E20, I think it was, which is like a home keyboard, but it was built with D50 sounds. And all of the sounds in the Anthology 1987 are just exactly as they're supposed to be. It sounds phenomenal, and I'm taken straight back home to my dad's keyboard and some of the tunes I used to make using that. It's fantastic. I love it. And it looks like there's going to be more in that series. I mean, who's stopping from Roland from releasing all their stuff in software? It's completely possible. I did a demo video of the ACB synths, which is on this YouTube channel if you want to check out what they sound like. I also highlighted some of the sort of CPU load problems that they have. They are a bit intensive, particularly the System 1. I think you're asking a lot for the computer to be able to handle lots of polyphony and sustain on an instrument like the System 1, which has always just been in hardware and recent hardware as well. But anyway, it's up on rolandcloud.com. You can get a sort of beta entry now for about $20 for your first month. I don't know, I mean, is this the way forward? Is this the way software is gonna go from here on in? Is that the way things are gonna be, that we're gonna have to subscribe to all the software that we want to use? I don't know. There's more of it about. I mean, from one point of view, if you want to get access to fabulous things that you could never afford, then, you know, a quick couple of months subscription to something is awesome. But most of us, because we just kind of like to have a piece of gear. We like to buy a piece of hardware and have it. We like to have a piece of software and use it, you know. I don't know. I'll leave that in your hands anyway. So that's kind of pretty much it in the world of computer music, except for one thing which nicely bridges the gap between software and modular, and that's Bitwig Studio 2. Now, Bitwig Studio 2 was announced before NAMM, but it was probably the first demonstration that people saw of it, but it looks absolutely phenomenal. I mean, there's not masses of changes in Bitwig. They've done a few enhancements, and they've done the MIDI out thing, they've done the track height thing, they've made lots of refinements to the interface that people were asking for, and they've filled up all those feature requests, that kind of thing. But the main change is that they've built in this what looks like to be stupendous modulation engine. So they've taken any of the LFO stuff. You used to be able to patch anything to anything within the devices rack. They've now sort of taken that out and stuck it into its own sort of modulation system. So you have this bank of weird modulation stuff where you've got LFOs and sine waves, but also sample and hold stuff and things knocking about and sort of crazy things that you can drop in and modulate anything with. I mean, that's really exciting. I think that looks really interesting. And funny enough, that's kind of what Traction have been doing for a while. They just haven't really got that across very well. Whereas I think Bitwig is going to do a pretty awesome job of getting across how exciting that can be. But that wasn't the only thing. The way that this segues into modular is because they also brought into being some CV and gate devices. So you can drop those modulators directly onto a CV device in Bitwig, and that will send CV signals out to your modular. Now that is interesting. That's the sort of thing I've been looking for a lot. I mean, you can already do this in some bits of software like Reactor and other bits and pieces, but this is the first door to fully embrace it. And I think that could really sort of be the gateway between the computer system and the modular system. And that's quite exciting. However, there's one big problem with it, and that's to do with the audio interface. In order to send a control voltage out of your computer, you have to send it out of an audio output. But the majority of audio interfaces do not support control voltage, because control voltage is a set flat voltage. It is a set value, whereas audio, as we know, is a sine wave. It's a continuously varying signal. And audio interfaces are designed to deal with this, not designed to deal with that. And in many cases, audio interfaces have filters built in to prevent this kind of thing, because they could damage speakers and damage equipment, that kind of thing. So how do we do it? Well, we do it by using an audio interface which has some of its outputs DC coupled. Now, DC coupling is a way of enabling the audio outputs to handle set values. So if your audio interface has DC coupled output, then you can run CV through it and out to a modular system. If you don't, if they're AC coupled like normal audio interfaces, then you cannot do that. And that's a bit of a pig, because there are very few audio interfaces that are DC coupled. Currently, it's most of the Motu stuff and the odd RME interface and a few others. So they are thin on the ground and they are expensive. Now, hopefully this is going to change, and I hoped dearly that the collaboration between Bitwig and Bastille Instruments, which was advertised before NAMM, was going to solve the problem and was going to provide a little magic box that kind of converted the AC coupling into DC coupling, or something interesting like that. But sadly, no. What the Bastille box is a sync box that keeps your computer from Bitwig Studio, for instance, kicking out an audio pulse through this little box, keeping your modular in time, so that you can record your modular system directly into Bitwig, bang on the grid. So there's no variation or shifting or weirdness going on. It's a great little, perfect little sync box. You don't have to use MIDI. You don't have to use any other gear. Just this little audio pulse going through this box from a normal sound card, funnily enough, will keep the whole thing in time. And that's brilliant. But you're still not getting your CV out of your computer into your modular. You need a DC coupled audio interface. Now, I'm going to be looking into this a lot over the coming months, because it's something that I want to do. And I don't want to have to buy a really expensive audio interface to do it. There has to be another way. There has to be a cheap way, a smaller box, or some way of either using my current interface or just adapting it slightly. But I'll be looking into that anyway. So the Bastille Instruments box is called Click, and it's going to be available for about 50 quid in a month or so. Bitwig Studio 2 is going to be out in the end of February, and I will absolutely be doing a full review on this channel. Right then, moving into the crazy, zany and messy world of modular synthesis then. There was tons, there was hundreds of manufacturers there with all sorts of boxes that go bing and boxes that go and things which modulate and things which do this and do that. And I can't really go into them all. In fact, I did a roundup on gearnews.com, so head over to Gear News and you'll find my articles of the modular roundup from NAMM, and that will list pretty much everything that I could find, all the new stuff, all the manufacturers, and videos and demonstrations of the lot. So all I'm going to do here is pick out, say, my favourite 3, or something like that. I'll start off with Make Noise, probably my favourite producers of modular, because they just make weird shit. And whenever I listen to them talk about it, I feel like I've learnt something, although I'm not even sure what that is. But they have this new module called the Morphogene. Could be Morphogenie? I'm not sure. Morphogenie thing. It is not a sampler, they say. It's a microsound and tape music module. It uses reels. As in reels of tape, I suppose, but that's not really what it uses. It uses an SD card which holds kind of files, but they call them reels, and they call the way you edit them splicing and slicing. So you can slice it up and splice it back together, kind of like you would with a sampler, but it's not a sampler, obviously. This is kind of some kind of messed up audio transference portal through to other dimensions. So I'm not entirely sure what it does, but it does seem to take bits of sound, it sort of cuts them up and interlaces them, and there's lots of granular stuff going on and general weirdness. It has this fantastic front panel with these glowing things for forwards and reverse. It's just exciting to look at. It sounds amazing in a weird, messed up kind of way, and just looks like a lot of fun to play with, as all Make Noise stuff does. Erica Synths had 2 things on show really. The first one was the Octasource, which is a fantastically black, I mean all their stuff is black, deep black. It's sort of black with black knobs and black lights that light up black to tell you that something has happened. It's just sort of this deep darkness, and the Octasource just fits in there perfectly. And actually, rather than having a jellyfish on the front, it's got this octopus, this sort of scary looking sinister octopus. Anyway, so the Octasource is an LFO. It's got 8 LFO waveforms and 8 LFO outputs, and it's all done in kind of this circle, and there's lights, and the whole thing is going around the speed of the LFO and the modulation. And you can run 8 different waveforms out 8 different outputs, or the same one round different ones, or it can step from one to the other. I mean, everything is CV controllable and triggerable and changeable and selectable. It's an amazing piece of modulation module for modular. So that was fun. The other thing they have is a desktop version of their Fusion Delay Flanger Vintage Ensemble module. So they put it so it's kind of spilled out of the Eurorack into this desktop box. Nice fat valve sitting in the middle, and you stuff the signal in and it delays it on long delays, or if you put it to short delay, it then sort of gives it more of a flangey effect, and it's all being fed back through the valve state and overdriven and messed around with. They've put a guitar input on, they've put a foot switch on so that you can bypass it and turn it on and off. It's brilliant. It's brilliant fun to mess with. I mean, I'd definitely like one in my modular. As for having a desktop one, I don't know. I think it's interesting how these modular guys are actually they really don't care. They just want everyone to use their stuff. So if people are finding modular difficult, well then we'll build a desktop one. It's the same with Dreadbox. They do the same thing. They had a 4-voice polyphonic Abyss desktop synth, which looked fantastic. But again, it was in a desktop box, because they want everyone to use their stuff. They don't want to restrict themselves to just modular, even if that's where they started. They want to keep pushing and give everyone a chance to use their stuff, and that's flipping awesome. Yeah, there's no point getting stuck in some kind of purist way of doing things if you're just restricting your market or restricting the fun that people have. Yeah, why not push it out into desktop units and other more accessible stuff so that more people can play with your gear? That's got to be what it's about. IntelliGel and Applied Acoustic Systems got together and produced this wonderfully named module called Plonk. Essentially, it's an acoustically moduled percussion module. So you've got all sorts of membranes and resonators and sounds and plinks and beams and mallets and all that sort of stuff within this module. So it's kind of a bit like a physically modelled oscillator. So it's a sound source where you get bings and bangs and properly modelled acoustic sounds out of it. I'm not explaining it very well, but It just puts the Applied Acoustics Chromaphone sound source into your modular system. And I think that's very, very interesting. There were so many more modules, from the really dull utility bits and pieces through to the most creative, extraordinary selection of things you could possibly imagine. There was a lot of sampler-based modules around, because this whole sort of melding between digital and analog is just sort of happening and going off, and people don't mind. There's none of that sort of it must be analog stuff going on. It's like, it's analog, it's digital, we don't care. What we like is the interaction. What we like is the ability to patch and modulate and cross audio from here to here and signals from here to here. That's what's important, not the origin of the sound, if you know what I mean. There was nothing new from Korg. They had a few updates and special editions of things. Nothing new from Roland other than the Roland Cloud. Nothing from Moog. In fact, they were there kind of with this sort of display of celebration of synthesis and their users, as opposed to any new products. And Yamaha, well, I don't know, where the hell was Yamaha? Where is Yamaha these days? Are they doing anything? Are you doing anything there, Yamaha? I don't know. However, on the smaller manufacturer side, there were new synths from Dave Smith Instruments. There were new synths from Tom Oberheim, Dreadbox. There was a weird Synthal 8 thing from Percussa. I mean, there was so much hardware that it's going to be really, really difficult on my pocket and on the space in my shed. So that's enough, I think. Yeah, I think that was probably plenty. I mean, maybe it's because my focus has shifted a bit towards synthesis and hardware that I actually found this year's NAMM pretty exciting. So in other news, I'll be rounding up my review of the Surface Book because my loan runs out this week. In fact, it's currently in the shed going through a bit of a battery drain test. I've done a ton of performance testing on it, and software testing and audio testing and interface testing, and it's all on this YouTube channel and on surfaceproaudio.com. So do go and check that out if you're interested in how well the Microsoft Surface Book performs for music production. And after that, I'll be carrying on the exploration of the Surface with my trusty Surface Pro 4. Molten Modular is about to get interesting as my time gets freed up a little bit to focus on that. So my first series of videos is going to be coming up very soon, talking about semi-modular stuff, talking about soft tube modular, and then getting into buying my first case and my first module. So that's exciting. I'm excited about that. So give us a few weeks on that and that'll start appearing soon on moltenmodular.com. In the world of the audio PC, we have bang up to date with all the latest 7th generation Intel technology. So do go and check those out. And you'll find the same technology on our Performer Pro laptop, which is an awesome, thick, heavy, fast, extraordinary laptop for mobile studio and live performance. So that'll do. Here we go then, another year. Let's get on with it. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.